There is a version of The Simpsons that everybody knows. The one with the couch gag. The one with Homer saying dough, and Bart writing lines on a chalkboard, and Marge making that low, worried sound in the back of her throat. The one that has been on television since 1989, and will probably still be on television when everyone watching this is very old. That version is comfortable. That version is familiar. That version is safe. But there is another version. One that has been running underneath the first one the whole time. An episode about a child who sold the most important part of himself for $5 and spent the rest of the episode learning what he had lost. An episode about a man who was kept alive past the point where being alive looked like living, shuffling through dark trees every Friday night. An episode that is banned. An episode that predicted the show's own death and then kept going anyway. Welcome to Yellow Fan. Turn the lights down. These are the scariest Simpsons episodes ever made. Cape Fear, Season 5, Episode 2, The Night Sideshow Bob Almost Won. There is a moment near the end of Cape Fear where Bart Simpson is completely alone on a houseboat at night, and a man with a machete is walking toward him across the deck. No parents, no help coming, no joke to defuse it, just a 10-year-old boy and the person who has been trying to kill him for years, finally close enough to do it. The Simpsons had done scary things before. It had done dark things. But this was different. This was a children's cartoon putting its main kid character in genuine, unresolved danger with nowhere to go, and then holding that moment for long enough that you actually felt it. There was no cutaway. There was no adult rushing in to fix it. The show just let that scene breathe. A little boy and a killer, standing in the dark on a boat that had drifted away from shore in the middle of the night. Cape Fear is Season 5, Episode 2. It aired on October 7th, 1993. It was written by John Vitti and directed by Rich Moore, and it is widely considered one of the greatest episodes the show has ever produced. Not just one of the scariest, but one of the best, full stops. Entertainment Weekly named it the third greatest episode in the history of the show. Al Jean, one of the show's longest-serving producers, has called it his favorite Simpsons episode of all time. On IMDb, it holds a 9.2 out of 10 rating, which puts it in the small group of episodes that approach perfection by any measure the show has been judged by. So what is it? And why does it feel like a horror movie wearing a cartoon's clothes? The setup is simple. Bart starts receiving threatening letters in the mail. Most of them are written in blood. One of them, written in black ink, which becomes its own gag, says, "I kill you, scum," and is signed by Homer, who is apparently also furious with Bart for reasons the show does not explain. But the main letters, the real ones, the ones soaked in menace, come from Sideshow Bob. Sideshow Bob is one of the great villains in television history, animated or otherwise. He was originally the sidekick on Krusty the Clown show, a tall, educated, classically trained man with enormous feet and a voice like a cello, who was framed for a crime he didn't commit and then spent the rest of his existence trying to murder the 10-year-old who exposed him. He is voiced by Kelsey Grammer, who plays him with a kind of wounded, furious dignity that makes him genuinely unsettling. He is smart, he is patient, and he has been in prison this whole time, writing letters in blood, waiting for the day he gets out. That day arrives at a parole hearing. Bob's lawyer argues his case. The parole board is concerned about a tattoo on Bob's chest that reads, "Die Bart Die." Bob explains, completely calmly, that this is actually German for the Bart the. One of the board members nods and says, "Well, no one who speaks German could be an evil man." Bob is released. This is exactly the kind of joke The Simpsons was built on. Absurd, fast, pointed, and slightly disturbing underneath the laugh. The system that is supposed to keep dangerous people contained has just let one go because of a language pun. The joke lands hard. And then the episode moves forward, and the jokes get fewer, and the tension starts building. And by the time Bart is on that houseboat in the dark, it has nearly gone away entirely. After Bart spots Bob at a movie theater, the family is there watching Ernest Go Somewhere Cheap, another joke that is so casual it almost hides how menacing the scene around it is. The Simpsons go into witness protection. They are relocated to a houseboat on a lake called Terror Lake. Their last name is changed to Thompson. A new animated animated opening plays, identical in structure to the regular Simpsons opening, but with everything renamed. Thompson Family, Cloudy Skies, a slightly wrong version of the world they normally live in. It is one of the stranger, more quietly unsettling moments in the show's run. The same family in a different world, trying to outrun something that is going to find them anyway. Bob, of course, has already found them. He strapped himself to the underside of their car before they left. What happens next is the sequence the episode is most famous for, though not because it is scary. As the family drives to Terror Lake, Bob, hidden beneath the car, is hit by speed bumps. He is splashed by hot coffee Homer throws out the window. The family impulsively drives through a cactus field, and Bob takes each cactus while the family above has no idea. He emerges from under the car and immediately steps on a rake. The rake handle swings up and hits him in the face. He steps on another one, same thing, and then another, and another. Originally, the script called for Bob to step on one rake. Then it became 9 in a row. Then the episode was still running short on time, so the sequence was repeated a second time from the beginning. Same rakes, same expression, same sound. According to writer Mike Reiss, this turned a slapstick joke into something stranger and harder to name. The audience laughs the first time because it is funny. They laugh less the second time because the joke should be over. And then they laugh again on the third or fourth rake because the stubbornness of it, the fact that the show refuses to stop, becomes its own kind of comedy. It is a bit about how long the thing can go before it stops being funny, and then how long it can keep going after that, before it becomes funny again for a completely different reason. The writers have been open about this. The intention was to make the joke land, then kill the joke by going too long, and then find something on the other side of that. It is one of the most deliberately strange decisions the show ever made, and it works in a way that is hard to fully explain. But then the episode returns to the dark part. Bob gets onto the houseboat. He finds Bart alone. He ties up the rest of the family, and he walks across the deck toward the boy with a machete. The score playing underneath this, Bernard Herrmann's original Cape Fear theme, is the same music used in the 1962 thriller the episode is based on. It is not a parody of that music. It is that music, playing straight, over a cartoon. The effect is startling in a way that even people who have seen the episode many times describe as genuinely uncomfortable. Bart is out of options. He is a 10-year-old with no weapons, no allies, no escape route. The boat has drifted away from the dock. The water is dark. Bob is closer now. And then Bart does the one thing that is available to him, the thing that only works because Bob is Bob. He asks Bob, as his last wish, to sing the entire score of a Gilbert and Sullivan operetta called HMS Pinafore before killing him. Bob cannot resist. He is an educated man. He has refined taste. He has been in prison, and before that, he was on a children's television show, and neither of those things are what he deserves. He pulls on a full sailor's uniform. He begins to sing. The full score of HMS Pinafore takes long enough that the boat drifts all the way back to shore. Chief Wiggum, hearing the noise, arrests Bob on the spot. Bart beat him, not with strength, not with help, not with a plan, with the knowledge that Bob's ego was bigger than his patience. He stalled long enough for the boat to move. It is a funny ending. It is also a genuinely clever one, the kind of ending that respects its own threat, because it acknowledges that the only way to beat someone as smart and determined as Bob is to use the specific, particular thing that makes Bob who he is. Brute force would not have worked. Running would not have worked. Bart read his enemy correctly, and it saved him. The episode was the last one written by the show's original writing staff before a new team came on board. According to production notes, they wanted to go out with something that felt complete, something that proved what the show could do. The rake sequence exists because the episode was too short and they needed to fill time. The final scene exists because a villain needed to be beaten in a way that felt true to who he was. Both of these decisions, one born of necessity, one born of craft, became some of the most remembered moments in the show's entire run. That is the Cape Fear magic. A threat that feels real. A resolution that earns itself. Comedy and menace sharing the same space without one canceling the other out. There is also something worth sitting with about what the episode chooses not to resolve. Bob is arrested, yes. He goes back to prison. But the show, in that final shot, does not feel triumphant. It feels temporarily safe. Bob is contained again, not defeated. He will escape again. He will write more letters. He will be back. Bart knows this. The show knows this. The audience knows this. The houseboat drifts back to its dock. The family goes home. The name Thompson gets abandoned. Everything returns to normal, or whatever passes for normal on Evergreen Terrace. And the episode ends with the understanding that this particular story is over, but the larger one, the one about a boy and the man who will never stop wanting to kill him, is still very much running. That understanding sits underneath the comedy like the Herman score sits underneath the final scene. Present the whole time, never quite going away. Cape Fear is the episode that proved The Simpsons could do genuine thriller territory without losing what made it funny. It borrowed a horror story from the real world, ran it through Springfield, and sent it back out on the other side changed. Still scary, still tense, still anchored in something that felt dangerous, but now also carrying the rake and the sailor uniform and the specific absurd dignity of a man singing opera to avoid being stopped. It is one of the best 22 minutes the show ever produced. But the next episode on this list is not about a man trying to kill a child. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. It is about a child who willingly handed away the most important thing he had for $5 to a kid in a baseball hat, and then spent the rest of the episode learning, slowly and in the most unsettling ways, exactly what he had given up. Section 2. Bart Sells His Soul. Season 7, Episode 4. The Mundane Horror of Feeling Nothing. There is a moment in Bart Sells His Soul where Bart blows on a freezer door at the Quickie Mart. He does it the way kids do, leaning in close, breathing out slowly, waiting for that little fog of condensation to appear on the glass. The kind of small, pointless thing a person does 100 times in their life without thinking about it. A nothing moment. A moment that means absolutely nothing. Except this time, nothing happens. No fog, no condensation, just Bart's breath disappearing into the air, leaving the glass completely clear, and Bart standing there staring at it with an expression the show does not play for laughs. He tries again. Still nothing. He steps back, looks at his hands, looks at the door. Rod and Todd Flanders walk up beside him, breathe on the same door, and immediately leave perfect little clouds of condensation on the glass. They do not notice Bart. They do not notice anything is wrong. They just breathe on the door the way children breathe on doors, leave their little fog marks, and walk away. Bart watches them go. This is the horror of Bart Sells His Soul. Not a monster, not a killer, not a dark night or a locked room or a thing with teeth. The horror is that something essential has been removed from a child, And the evidence of that removal is showing up in the smallest, quietest, most ordinary moments of his life. The fog on the door. The automatic door at the Quickie Mart that opens for everyone except him. The pets that no longer want to be near him. The cartoon, Itchy and Scratchy, that he watches and feels nothing from, even though he has always laughed at it before. It just feels slightly off. And that is somehow worse than anything dramatic the show could have done. Bart Sells His Soul is Season 7, Episode 4. It aired on October 8th, 1995. It was written by Greg Daniels and directed by Wesley Archer. Series creator Matt Groening has called it one of his personal favorite episodes. The show's creative team placed it among the top 5 best episodes ever produced. Writers from the fields of religion, philosophy, popular culture, and psychology have all cited this episode in books about The Simpsons. It has been used in religious education classes in secondary schools as a teaching tool for discussing the nature of the soul. On IMDb, it holds a rating of 8.8 out of 10. This is not just a well-liked episode. This is an episode that crossed out of entertainment and into something that people use to teach children about what it means to be a person. So how did it get there? The episode starts at church. The Simpson family is serving as ushers on a Sunday morning, which means Bart has access to the hymn book. He swaps the morning hymn for a song called Inagata Devita by Iron Butterfly. The congregation begins singing it. Reverend Lovejoy takes a long time to notice something is wrong, possibly because he does not know the song, possibly because he does not want to stop the service mid-hymn, possibly both. The organist, Gertie, plays the full 17-minute version before collapsing. Lovejoy gathers the children in his office and demands to know who is responsible. Milhouse, afraid of what will happen to his soul if he lies, immediately turns Bart in. This leads to Bart and Milhouse cleaning the organ pipes together as punishment, and while they work, they get into an argument about whether souls are real. Bart takes the position that souls do not exist. They are made up. They are something adults invented to scare children into behaving. There is no such thing. Milhouse pushes back, asking what religions would have to gain from lying about something like a soul. The camera cuts to Reverend Lovejoy counting money. The joke lands and moves on. Milhouse makes Bart an offer. If Bart really believes his soul is not real, then it should cost him nothing to sell it. $5, right now. All Bart has to do is write the words, Bart Simpson's soul, on a piece of paper and hand it over. Bart does it. He takes the $5. He hands Milhouse the paper. He feels nothing, because he believes the whole thing is meaningless. And then things start going wrong. The first signs are small. The automatic door at the Quickie Mart does not open for him. He does not find Itchy and Scratchy funny anymore. He cannot laugh genuinely. Santa's little helper will not play with him. Snowball the cat hisses. A squirrel runs away from him. The cotton candy vendor at the fair does not offer him a free sample the way he always has before. None of these things are dramatic. None of them are violent or loud or sudden. They are all just small removals, small absences. The world behaving toward Bart the way it might behave toward someone who is not quite there. The freezer door moment is the one that makes it real, because fogging up a glass is not something a person does for any reason. It is not useful. It accomplishes nothing. It is just one of those small physical experiences that a person has and registers as part of being alive, part of being a body in a world that responds to you. And when it stops working, when the breath disappears without leaving a mark, something has clearly changed that is much deeper than any of the other signs. Bart goes to get his soul back. This is where the episode becomes something close to a nightmare told in daylight. Milhouse has already sold the paper to Comic Book Guy at the Android's Dungeon, trading Bart's soul for Alf-themed Pogs. Not regular Pogs, Alf-themed Pogs. The specific cheapness of that trade is part of the joke, but it is also part of what makes the whole thing feel genuinely awful. Bart's soul moved through the world as a piece of disposable trading material, passing from hand to hand without anyone treating it as something that mattered. Comic Book Guy tells Bart he already sold it again to someone else and refuses to say who. Bart walks home in the rain. What follows is a bad dream. A genuine nightmare sequence played straight by the show without any of the distancing comedy that usually surrounds Bart's darker moments. In the dream, other children are rowing boats with their souls, each soul appearing as a glowing blue version of the child, sitting at the bow of the boat, helping row. The souls are companions. They are real. They are part of the children in a way that makes the children whole. Bart is alone in his boat. He rows and rows but goes nowhere. His soul is not there to help him. He watches the other children drift away toward a beautiful lit-up amusement park on the shore, their boats moving easily in the water, while Bart is stuck in the dark, going in circles, alone. This is a cartoon, a show that, in this same episode, has a subplot where Moe converts his bar into a family restaurant and screams at a small child for asking for a warmer drink. A show that regularly features Homer being hit in the head and Bart skateboarding away from authority figures and Springfield being just slightly too ridiculous to ever feel fully real. And yet here is Bart in a dream, rowing alone in the dark, watching other children move toward the light. The show does not explain this image. It does not comment on it. It just shows it and moves on, the way the very best Simpsons moments always did, presenting something more emotionally heavy than the surrounding comedy would suggest was coming, letting it sit for a moment, and then continuing. Bart wakes up. He goes to the church. He gets down on his knees and prays. This is another moment the show plays completely straight. Not Bart faking prayer, not Bart being cynical about it, not a joke about how wrong it is that the troublemaker is the one asking for divine help. Just Bart, alone in the church, asking in an honest voice whether his soul is real and whether he can have it back. He starts the prayer with the words, "Are you there, God? It's me, Bart Simpson," which is a direct reference to the famous Judy Blume novel, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, a book about a 12-year-old girl trying to figure out what she believes. The writers chose that reference on purpose. They were putting Bart in the same position, a kid asking the biggest questions out loud because there is nowhere else to put them. The paper floats down from above. It appears in the air in front of Bart, drifting down slowly. For a moment, the show allows the possibility that God heard him, that something responded, that the prayer worked. Then Lisa reveals she bought it. She had tracked down the current owner. Comic Book Guy had sold it to an unnamed person, but Lisa found it and paid whatever it cost. She hands it back to Bart and explains what some philosophers believe, that no one is born with a soul and that you have to earn one through suffering and thought and prayer. Bart takes the paper and immediately eats it. The joke lands. Lisa rolls her eyes. The episode ends. But the ending is not really a joke, or it is a joke on the surface and something else underneath, because the paper coming back is not what restored Bart's soul. The philosophers Lisa quoted suggested you earn a soul through suffering and thought and prayer, And Bart did all three of those things. He suffered when the world stopped responding to him. He thought about what he had lost when he could not fog up the glass and could not laugh at Itchy and Scratchy. And he prayed genuinely in an empty church, asking for something back that he had given away without understanding its value. The paper is a symbol. The journey was the actual point. That is the reading that religious education teachers use this episode to demonstrate. That is what the philosophers and psychologists who wrote about it were pointing toward. The soul, in the version this episode tells, is not a thing you are born with as a permanent possession. It is something you build through experience, through feeling things, through staying connected to the world in all the small ways, including the completely pointless ones, like breathing on a glass door and leaving a fog mark that disappears in seconds. When Bart lost his soul, he lost that connection. He could not fog the glass because he was not fully present in the world anymore. He was going through the motions. The cotton candy vendor did not offer him a sample because something that usually reads as alive and engaged was simply not there. The pets sensed an absence. And when he got it back, or earned it back, depending on how you read the ending, the first thing he did was eat the paper. Which is exactly the right move. You do not keep a soul in your pocket. You put it back inside you. The episode was written in 1995. It has been used as a teaching tool ever since. It has shown up in books about philosophy and religion and psychology. It holds an 8.8 on IMDb from thousands of votes. Matt Groening called it one of his favorites. The creative staff put it in their personal top 5. None of that is why it is on this list. It is on this list because it is the only Simpsons episode that can genuinely disturb an adult who first watched it as a child. Not because it is darker than they remembered, but because it is more precise. The thing the episode is describing, that feeling of going through your life slightly emptied, of doing the motions without the feeling behind them, of watching other people's boats move toward the light while yours goes in circles, is something that a child can absorb without fully understanding, and that an adult can recognize immediately. The horror of Bart sells his soul is that it is not about a 10-year-old. It never was. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And while Bart's nightmare ends with a piece of paper drifting down from above, the next episode on this list ends very differently. It ends with a man in a room full of people who loved the main character being ignored by every single one of them at his own funeral, while the man he spent his last weeks trying to destroy falls asleep mid-eulogy and gets a laugh. Section 3, Homer's Enemy, Season 8, Episode 23. What happens when a real person enters Springfield? There is a moment near the end of Homer's Enemy where Frank Grimes dies. He has just had a complete breakdown in front of everyone at the Springfield nuclear power plant. He has been screaming and mocking Homer, grabbing other people's lunches, wandering through the building doing everything wrong on purpose, shouting about how nothing in this place makes any sense and nobody seems to care. He grabs a pair of high-voltage wires without safety gloves, the kind Homer always wears when handling them, and yells that he is Homer Simpson, that he does not need gloves, and that he does not need anything. The electricity kills him instantly. His funeral is the next scene. His co-workers are there, his colleagues, the people who watched him work hard every single day, who saw his entire story unfold, who witnessed what happened to him. Reverend Lovejoy speaks, and Homer, sitting in the front row, falls asleep. He begins talking in his sleep, mumbling something about a cartoon, and everyone in the room starts laughing. The funeral for Frank Grimes ends with the whole crowd laughing at something Homer said in his sleep while Grimes is being lowered into the ground. Nobody notices. Nobody cares. Springfield moves on. That is the ending of Homer's Enemy. No resolution, no lesson learned. No moment where the show acknowledges that something genuinely wrong just happened. The world that destroyed Frank Grimes just keeps going, and Homer does not even know he was in a story. Homer's Enemy is Season 8, Episode 23. It aired on May 4th, 1997. It was written by John Swartzwelder and directed by Jim Reardon. It holds a 9.3 out of 10 rating on IMDb from over 7,700 votes, which makes it the single highest rated episode in the entire history of The Simpsons. Not just one of the best by that measure. And yet, the show's own producer, Mike Reiss, called it one of his least favorite episodes, describing it in 2007 as being in bad taste. Matt Groening loved it and ranked it among his personal favorites. John Swartzwelder, the writer, listed it as one of his favorite episodes he ever wrote. This is one of the most divided episodes the show has ever produced, among its own creators and among fans. People either think it is the bravest thing the show ever did, or they think it went somewhere the show should not have gone. Almost nobody is neutral about it. So what is it? The premise is this. What would happen if a completely normal, reasonable, hard-working person walked into Springfield and had to deal with Homer Simpson? Not a character who has grown up in Springfield and absorbed its logic. Not someone who has spent years around Homer and learned to accept him as part of the landscape. A new person. A fresh pair of eyes. Someone who looks at Homer and sees exactly what Homer is, without any of the affection that everyone else has built up over years of knowing him. That person is Frank Grimes. Frank Grimes has had a hard life. The episode opens with a news segment about him. He was abandoned by his parents, taught himself everything he knows, survived a silo explosion, put himself through school, and earned a degree in nuclear physics entirely through his own effort. He is introduced as a real American hero, the kind of person who represents the best version of what working hard and not giving up is supposed to produce. Mr. Burns sees the segment and decides to hire him. Then Burns forgets about this decision and gives the executive position to a dog who pulled a drowning child from a river. Frank Grimes is assigned to Sector 7G, the same sector as Homer. What Frank sees when he arrives is Homer Simpson, a man who is lazy, careless, and dangerously incompetent at a job that requires careful attention because one wrong move could cause a nuclear disaster. Homer regularly eats on the job, falls asleep, leaves dangerous materials lying around, and does not seem to understand or care what the stakes of his position actually are. This would be annoying to any reasonable person. But then Frank starts learning more. He discovers that Homer has won a Grammy, that Homer went to space on a shuttle mission, that Homer met President Gerald Ford, that Homer once saved the entire plant from a nuclear meltdown, that Homer, despite being the least qualified and most careless person in the building, has had an extraordinary life full of achievements that Frank, who has worked twice as hard for every single thing, has never come close to reaching. This is the knife the episode twists slowly throughout its runtime. It is not that Homer is bad at his job. It is that Homer has somehow had an incredible life, despite being bad at everything. And Frank, who has been good at things his whole life, has almost nothing to show for it. Frank declares himself Homer's enemy. He says it out loud. He decides the only way to restore any sense to the world is to expose Homer as a fraud, to make everyone see what he sees. Homer does not understand this. Homer tries to befriend Frank. He invites Frank to dinner, buys lobster to impress him, and spends the evening obliviously showing Frank more of the things that make Frank's existence feel meaningless: the family, the house, the happiness. Frank leaves angrier than when he arrived. The defining attempt to destroy Homer comes when Frank tricks him into entering a design contest for a new nuclear power plant. The catch is that this contest is for children. Frank's plan is to let Homer humiliate himself in front of everyone by presenting a child's project as a serious entry, making it impossible for anyone to ignore how unqualified Homer truly is. Homer builds a model of a nuclear plant out of macaroni and popsicle sticks. He presents it, and the crowd loves it. Homer wins. Everyone cheers. Frank is the only person in the room who thinks something is wrong. And he stands there pointing it out, and nobody listens, because nobody in Springfield is wired to see Homer the way Frank sees him. They are all already on Homer's side. They always have been. This is the moment Frank breaks. He wanders through the plant mimicking Homer, grabbing food, ignoring safety rules, acting like none of it matters. And when he grabs the high-voltage wires, the thing he says right before the electricity kills him is that he does not need safety gloves because he is Homer Simpson. He does not die fighting. He does not die making a point that lands. He dies trying to prove something to a room that does not understand what he is trying to prove, in a building that keeps running exactly as it always did, and is buried while Homer snores in the front row. The episode was designed this way on purpose. Producer George Meyer explained the thinking in an interview. He said that Frank's mistake was shining a light on Springfield, that pointing out what is wrong with Springfield is not something the world rewards, that the people who do that tend to become something close to victims. He said the writers took a certain dark satisfaction in Frank's end, not because they wanted bad things to happen to him, but because his rightness about everything was exactly what made his destruction feel inevitable. John Swartzwelder, the writer, was asked about the ending in his first major interview in 30 years, published in The New Yorker. The interviewer pointed out that the episode did not exactly have a lot of heart. Swartzwelder's response was that Frank was asking for it the whole episode, that Frank did not approve of Homer, that he was asking for it and he got it. This is a remarkable thing for the writer of an episode to say about his own character. And it is also, in a strange way, the most honest possible reading of what the episode is doing. Frank was right. Homer is a disaster. The nuclear plant is a running hazard. None of this should work. But it does work, because Springfield operates on a different set of rules than the real world, and Frank refused to accept those rules, and the rules won. There is something genuinely uncomfortable about sitting with that conclusion. The show is telling you, with complete clarity, that the world it has built rewards Homer and punishes Frank. That competence and effort and doing the right thing does not protect you. That the crowd will always laugh at Homer's sleep-talking before they will mourn the man in the coffin. The look of Frank Grimes was based on Michael Douglas's character in the 1993 film Falling Down, a frustrated man who sensed that the world is wrong gets pushed too far. Hank Azaria provided the voice, modeling it on actor William H. Macy, trying to capture the specific sound of seething anger underneath a calm surface. According to Azaria, the producers gave him more guidance on this performance than they usually would, because getting the balance right mattered enormously. Too angry, and Frank becomes a cartoon villain. Too calm, and the tragedy does not register. The performance needed to hold both at once. Josh Weinstein, one of the showrunners, has said he regretted killing Frank off after only one episode. He described Frank as such an amazing character that losing him felt like a genuine loss. The episode was set up in a way that could have introduced Frank as a recurring presence, the person in Springfield who sees things clearly, whose frustration with Homer's world could have been revisited and deepened. Instead, the episode kills him and ends, and Homer does not even know anything happened. That choice, to make his death complete and unacknowledged, is the thing that makes the episode sit in your chest differently than almost anything else the show produced. Most Simpsons episodes, even the dark ones, give you something to hold on to at the end. A resolution, a small warmth. Bart getting his soul back. Sideshow Bob being arrested. The song on the houseboat. Homer's enemy gives you a sleeping man at a funeral and a crowd that is laughing. That is the episode. That is the whole thing. And it is the highest rated episode the show has ever made. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. What comes next on this list is different in almost every way. Lighter in tone, funnier on the surface, full of famous guest stars and science fiction jokes. But underneath all of that, it contains one of the most quietly disturbing images the show ever put on screen. A glowing figure in the woods. A man who has been kept alive past the point where being alive looks like living. And a town that walks toward it with open arms and baseball bats. Section 4. The Springfield Files. Season 8, Episode 10. Mr. Burns and the Alien in the Woods. There is a moment in the Springfield Files where Homer Simpson is alone in the woods at night, and something walks toward him through the trees. It is glowing. It moves slowly. Its arms are out at its sides. Its voice is soft and high and strange, and it says, in a tone that sounds almost peaceful, that it brings love. Homer screams and runs. The show plays this for laughs. Homer running and screaming is one of the most reliable sources of comedy the series has. But the image itself, that glowing figure moving through dark trees toward a man who is completely alone, is not a comedy image. It is lifted directly from the visual language of horror and science fiction, the kind of thing that appears in films designed to make your skin feel wrong. The Simpsons took that image, placed it in Springfield, and then spent the rest of the episode making jokes around it, while never quite making the image itself funny. That tension between the genuine eeriness of what Homer saw and the comedy of everyone refusing to believe him is what makes the Springfield Files one of the strangest and most interesting episodes the show ever produced. The Springfield Files is Season 8, Episode 10. It aired on January 12, 1997. It was written by Reed Harrison and directed by Stephen Dean Moore. Leonard Nimoy, who spent years hosting a real show about unexplained phenomena, guest stars as himself. David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson also guest star, playing their actual characters from The X-Files, Fox Mulder and Dana Scully, who come to Springfield to investigate Homer's claim. The episode currently holds a 9.1 out of 10 rating on IMDb, making it the 7th highest rated episode in the show's history. In 2021, Variety placed it 7th on their list of the 30 best Simpsons episodes ever made. The idea came from Al Jean. He was at a story meeting and stepped away to use the bathroom, where he found a copy of TV Guide with the X-Files on the cover. He came back into the room and pitched a crossover. Nobody else wanted to do it. Gene and his writing partner Mike Reese decided to produce it themselves. Before the episode was finished, the script was sent to Chris Carter, the creator of The X-Files, who said it was an honor to be made fun of by The Simpsons. The setup is simple. Homer goes to Moe's Tavern on a Friday night and drinks heavily. A breathalyzer test establishes that he is, at that point, as drunk as Boris Yeltsin. He decides to walk home instead of drive, takes the wrong path, and ends up lost in the woods outside Springfield at night. That is where he sees it. The glowing figure, the outstretched arms, the soft voice offering love. Homer runs home and tells his family. Nobody believes him. Bart thinks it is funny. Lisa is skeptical. Marge is worried in the way she is always worried about Homer, which is more about him than about aliens. The next Friday, Homer goes back. He sees it again. He films it this time, but the footage is almost entirely static, with only the briefest flash of something glowing at the edge of the frame. The footage gets out. The town divides between believers and non-believers. Mulder and Scully arrive. The episode runs a series of tests on Homer, most of which are played for jokes. Homer's delayed reflexes, his inability to answer basic questions, a lie detector that he manages to break simply by existing near it. Scully, the scientist, finds nothing to support the alien theory. Mulder, the believer, finds Homer credible despite everything. The whole town goes to the woods on the following Friday to see for themselves. The figure appears. It says it brings love. And then Lisa steps forward and shines a light on it directly, and the whole crowd sees what it actually is. It is Mr. Burns. Smithers explains, Mr. Burns, who is very old and very fragile, receives a series of medical treatments once a week to keep himself alive for another 7 days. These treatments leave him twisted and disoriented. They give him a sweet, strange, high voice. The specific combination of procedures, a chiropractic treatment, a heavy dose of painkillers for the pain, and a throat treatment, produces exactly the thing Homer saw in the woods. A glowing, shuffling figure with its arms out, moving slowly through the dark, offering love in a voice that does not sound like it belongs to a human being. Mr. Burns has been doing this every week for who knows how long. He has been walking through those woods every Friday night because the treatments leave him disoriented and he wanders. The alien that had half of Springfield convinced there was something supernatural in their town is just their boss, barely held together by medical procedures, stumbling around in the dark because he is too old and too damaged to know where he is going. The crowd's response to this reveal is one of the episode's best and most disturbing jokes. Someone asks if the alien means love between a man and a woman, or love between a man and his cigar. A fight breaks out. The mood of wonder disappears instantly, replaced by the specific chaos that Springfield crowds always dissolve into, and Mr. Burns is left standing in the middle of it, still glowing, still shuffling, still not entirely sure what is happening around him. What makes this funny and uncomfortable at the same time is the image of Burns in that moment. He is not a threat. He is not dangerous. He is a very old, very sick man who has been artificially kept alive through procedures that leave him looking like something from a different world, walking through dark woods alone every week because the medicine that keeps him breathing also makes him lose track of where he is. The show has always used Mr. Burns as a source of comedy. He is the billionaire villain, the man who blocks out the sun, the employer who does not know Homer's name after years of working together. He is usually portrayed with a kind of cold precision, thin, deliberate, calculating. Here he is none of those things. Here he is just fragile and lost and glowing in the dark, and the only reason anyone paid attention to him at all is because Homer Simpson was drunk enough to wander into the same woods on the same night. There is something in that image that does not fully go away after the episode ends. The episode also contains what the writers have called the most illegal scene in the show's history. When Homer reports his alien sighting to the police, the lineup of possible aliens includes characters from other studios and companies, beings whose rights the writers never secured. According to the DVD commentary, the only alien in the lineup they had permission to use was Kang and Kodos, who belonged to the show itself, and retroactively Chewbacca, once Disney later purchased both Lucasfilm and the company that makes The Simpsons. Every other alien in that lineup was used without permission, and the writers have acknowledged this on the record. The episode was also a significant crossover success by any measure. In its original broadcast, it reached approximately 11.3 million households and was the third highest rated show on Fox that week, behind The X-Files itself and the premiere of King of the Hill. X-Files creator Chris Carter called being parodied by The Simpsons an honor. David Duchovny, according to production notes, was allowed to improvise parts of Mulder's rambling monologue about the truth. The crew simply left his microphone on and let him talk, and kept what he said. Leonard Nimoy's role in the episode is worth sitting with for a moment. He spent years hosting a real show called In Search Of, which investigated unexplained events and mysterious phenomena and treated them with complete seriousness. The Simpsons opens and closes this episode in the exact same format as that show, with Nimoy narrating in the same voice and the same tone he used when the subject was real. The joke is that the subject here is Homer Simpson getting drunk and stumbling through the woods, but Nimoy plays it straight. The music plays straight. The format plays straight. And the effect is that the episode constantly feels like it is one step away from being genuinely eerie, even when it is being funny. That is the thing about the Springfield Files that earns it a place on this list. Most Simpsons episodes that venture into spooky territory announce themselves clearly. The Treehouse of Horror episodes open with warnings and establish from the first frame that normal rules do not apply. Cape Fear builds its tension deliberately, letting you know a threat is coming. Bart Sells His Soul puts its horror in a dream sequence, a contained space. The Springfield Files does something different. It plants a real image, genuinely unsettling, genuinely strange, inside a comedy episode, and then never fully resolves the feeling that image creates. The reveal of Mr. Burns explains what Homer saw. It does not explain away the image of it. Burns shuffling through the dark trees with his arms out, glowing, saying he brings love, is still the same image whether you know who it is or not. The explanation makes it sadder, maybe, but it does not make it less strange. Homer saw something real in those woods. He was drunk, and he was afraid, and he ran. And the thing he saw was his boss, kept alive past the point of dignity by procedures that leave him looking like something from another world, walking alone in the dark every Friday night because that is what staying alive at that age and in that condition requires. Springfield went to see an alien and found an old man. That is the episode. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. What comes next is darker in a different way. Not the darkness of something strange in the woods, but the darkness of something that cannot be shown anymore. An episode that exists now in a strange space between memory and absence, featuring a guest star whose real-world story became so disturbing that the people who made the episode decided it could not be seen again. An episode that is, as of right now, the only one in the show's entire history that you cannot watch on any streaming service anywhere in the world. Section 5. Stark Raving Dad. Season 3, Episode 1. The Banned Episode and the Man Who Wasn't There. There is a moment near the end of Stark Raving Dad where a large, bald, white man stands in front of Lisa Simpson and sings her a birthday song. The song is called Happy Birthday, Lisa. It is gentle and sweet and genuinely lovely. Lisa stands there listening to it with her eyes going wide, and when it is over, she says it is the best present she ever got. The man who sang it smiles. The episode ends warmly. The family is okay. Everything is fine. That is the ending of Stark Raving Dad, as it was written, as it was intended, and as audiences received it when it first aired on September 19th, 1991. Now try watching it knowing what you know. Stark Raving Dad is Season 3, Episode 1. It was written by Al Jean and Mike Reiss. It aired to 12.8 million households and finished second in its time slot that week, behind the season premiere of The Cosby Show. It was the season opener, the first episode of the third season of what was already one of the most watched shows on television. And it featured, in the role of a mental patient who claimed to be Michael Jackson, the actual speaking voice of Michael Jackson. Jackson was not credited by his real name. He used the pseudonym John J. Smith. His singing parts were performed by a sound-alike named Kip Lennon, because Jackson's recording contract with his music label did not allow him to sing for other productions. Jackson arranged the whole thing so that he could play a joke on his brothers. He told them the voice was a real impersonator, and they believed him. He found this extremely funny. The read-through for the episode was held at the home of Jackson's manager. Dan Castellaneta, the voice of Homer, arrived 30 minutes late. Everyone sat in silence waiting for him. Nobody said a word. Jackson showed up to the recording session alone and did not use the special trailer the production had set up for him. He recorded his lines and left. This was 1991. Michael Jackson was the most famous entertainer alive. His involvement in the episode was kept secret for years. Matt Groening, when asked about it on television, hinted strongly but would not confirm. The pseudonym held, and the episode became one of the most watched and most remembered of the show's early seasons. Not because of the secret, but because it was genuinely good. Then, in March of 2019, a documentary called Leaving Neverland aired on HBO. It contained detailed accounts from two men who said Jackson had sexually abused them when they were children. The documentary renewed and deepened a conversation about Jackson that had been ongoing for decades, and it had immediate consequences across the entertainment industry. One of those consequences was Stark Raving Dad. Executive producer James L. Brooks announced that the episode would be pulled from circulation. It would be removed from syndication. It would not be included in future DVD releases of the show. It would not be available on any streaming service. He described this as the only choice to make. He said, "This is our book, and we are allowed to take out a chapter." Al Jean, one of the writers, said something more specific and more disturbing. In an interview, he said he believed Jackson appeared in the episode because it was part of what Jackson used to gain access to children. The episode has not been available on Disney Plus since the service launched in 2019. It is the only episode in the entire history of The Simpsons that cannot be watched there. Pre-2019, DVD copies of the complete third season still contain it. It can be purchased on Google Play and YouTube, but it has been deliberately removed from the main places where people watch the show, and the people who made it have said publicly that they believe this was the right decision. This is the shadow that now sits over everything in the episode. The episode itself is about Homer wearing a pink shirt to work. The shirt turned pink because Bart put his red Lucky cap in the laundry with the white shirts, and one of Homer's shirts came out the wrong color. Homer wears it to the Springfield nuclear power plant. Mr. Burns sees it and immediately decides Homer must be mentally unwell. No sane employee would wear a pink shirt to work. Homer is committed to a mental institution called the New Bedlam Rest Home for the Emotionally Interesting. At the institution, Homer is placed in a room with a large, heavy-set bald man who introduces himself as Michael Jackson from the Jacksons. Homer, who has never heard of Michael Jackson, believes him completely. This is one of the episode's central jokes, Homer's total ignorance of one of the most famous people on the planet. The two of them become friends. The man sings bits of Billie Jean and Ben. He performs the moonwalk, and Homer asks him how he does that thing with his feet. Meanwhile, Lisa is approaching her 8th birthday and is worried that Bart will forget it, as he has every year before. She reminds him. He promises. He forgets. Homer invites his new friend home from the institution. The man is there voluntarily and is free to leave whenever he wants. Bart, convinced this is the real Michael Jackson, immediately tells every person he knows. The entire population of Springfield gathers outside the Simpson house to see the pop star. When Homer introduces his friend, the crowd takes one look at a large white bald man and turns on Bart immediately. That is not Michael Jackson. The crowd disperses in anger. Bart has been publicly humiliated. Lisa finds out Bart forgot her birthday. She writes him a letter saying she is disowning him. The man, who has watched all of this unfold, approaches Bart and tells him he needs to make it right. He tells Bart that when he was growing up without money and his sisters had birthdays, he wrote them songs. He helps Bart write Happy Birthday, Lisa. The next morning, Bart and the man perform it for her together. She says it is the best present she has ever received. Then the man drops the act. He tells them his real name is Leon Kompowski. He is a bricklayer from Paterson, New Jersey. He explains that he spent years being angry, and that one day he started speaking in Michael Jackson's voice, and people smiled at him and treated him differently, and he felt like he was doing good in the world. So he kept doing it. He asks, quietly, which one of them is truly crazy? Then he says goodbye and leaves. This ending was written to be moving. A man who found that impersonating a famous person made people respond to him with warmth, who used that borrowed identity to do something genuinely good, who then walks away having accomplished what he came to do. It is a small story about kindness, about how sometimes the most important thing a person can do is help a 10-year-old boy write a song for his 8-year-old sister. The episode received positive reviews. It was widely remembered as a highlight of the 3rd season. The secret of Jackson's involvement gave it an extra layer of interest that kept people talking about it for years after. What the episode also contained, which nobody discussed in 1991, was a grown adult male celebrity spending time with children, in private, helping them with personal emotional problems, building trust and affection in a domestic setting. This is not subtext added later. This is what is in the episode. It is what was written. At the time it was written, in the context of 1991 and the enormous warmth surrounding Michael Jackson's public image, none of it read as anything other than sweet. The show was not trying to say anything sinister. The writers were not aware of anything sinister. They made a good faith episode with a famous guest star, and it aired, and people loved it. But Al Jean said in 2019 that he believes Jackson sought out the appearance because it served a specific purpose in Jackson's life. That what looked like a celebrity wanting to do something fun and unexpected with a TV show he liked was, in Jean's reading, something with a different intention underneath it. That reading cannot be confirmed. It cannot be proven. Jackson died in June 2009 and was never convicted of anything in a court of law. The question of what he did and did not do is one that different people have answered differently based on the same available evidence. And that is not something this script will try to resolve. What can be said is this: the episode exists. It is warm and funny and genuinely well made. The birthday song is lovely. Leon Kompowski's final speech is touching. And simultaneously, the real person behind that voice was someone whose relationship with children has been described by the men who said they experienced it in terms that are very difficult to sit with. The episode is banned. The warmth in it is real. Both of those things are true at the same time, and there is no version of watching it, if you can find it, where you do not feel both. That is the specific horror of Stark Raving Dad. Not a monster or a killer or a man in the woods. Just the knowledge that something that felt entirely safe, that aired on a Sunday night in 1991 and made 12.8 million households feel good, was built around a person whose real story is among the most disturbing in the history of American entertainment. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next episode on this list is also disturbing, but in a completely different way. It is disturbing because the show made it about itself. Because the writers sat down and decided to tell the story of their own decline, package it as comedy, end it with Homer saying this will be the last season, and then, more than 25 years later, still be on the air. Every prediction they made about themselves having come completely true. Section 6, Behind the Laughter, Season 11, Episode 22, The Show That Admitted It Was Dying. There is a moment near the very end of Behind the Laughter where Homer Simpson leans over to a film editor in a video editing room and says, quietly, "This will be the last season." He says it like a man who has accepted something, not with anger, not with sadness, just with the flat calm of someone stating a fact they have been carrying for a while. The editor does not respond. The camera does not comment. The episode just moves on to a brief joke and then ends. The Simpsons has now been on the air for over 35 years since that moment aired. Every single prediction the episode made about the show came true. The ratings fell, the quality dropped, the gimmick episodes multiplied, the celebrity guest stars kept coming. The writers who cared most about the show left. And Homer sat in that editing room in the year 2000 and told an editor that the next season would be the last, and it was not the last, and it has not been the last since. And the show kept going in exactly the direction the episode said it would go. That is what makes Behind the Laughter one of the most genuinely unsettling things the show ever produced. Not because it is dark in the way a horror episode is dark, but because it is the show looking in a mirror, describing exactly what it sees, and then walking back out of the room and continuing anyway. Behind the Laughter is Season 11, Episode 22. It aired on May 21st, 2000. It was written by Tim Long, George Meyer, Mike Scully, and Matt Selman. It was directed by Mark Kirkland. It won the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Animated Program at the 52nd Annual Emmy Awards. The composer who scored it, Alf Clausen, won an Annie Award for his music in the episode at the 28th Annual Annie Awards. The Simpsons writing staff later voted it into their own list of the top 15 episodes the show ever produced, making it the most recent episode on that list at the time of the vote. The episode is a parody of Behind the Music, a documentary series that ran on VH1 and followed the rise and fall of famous musicians. The format of Behind the Music was always the same. A narrator describes a success story, the success gets bigger and bigger, then something goes wrong, then everything collapses, then there is a redemption, then the show ends. VH1 and the producers of Behind the Music cooperated fully with the episode, allowing the show to use their complete graphics package. Jim Forbes, the actual narrator of Behind the Music, came in to record the voiceover. He used the same voice he used on the real show, that specific, serious, slightly breathless tone that makes everything sound both important and doomed. The premise of the episode is that the Simpson family are real people, not cartoon characters. They are a family from northern Kentucky who agreed to have their lives turned into a television show. The show, The Simpsons, is presented as a fictionalized, staged version of their actual lives, performed by them. Homer wrote a pilot based on his family, the network picked it up, and the rest is history. What follows is the full behind-the-music treatment applied to The Simpsons as a show. The early days are presented as chaotic but exciting. Homer's original pilot footage is deliberately bad, shaky and poorly directed, and nothing like a professional production. The show somehow gets made anyway. It becomes a hit. The family becomes famous. A recording contract follows. Awards follow. Money follows. The episode shows Beatlemania-level crowds surrounding Bart. A song called Simpsons Christmas Boogie somehow wins a Grammy for Best Thrash Metal, to the visible disgust of Ozzy Osbourne in the audience. The joke is that this is completely absurd, and also that it is not entirely unlike things that actually happened, as the show became one of the biggest cultural phenomena of the 1990s. Then the narrator's voice gets heavier. Things start going wrong. Homer, the episode explains, was injured doing physical comedy. Specifically, the scene from the Season 2 episode Bart the Daredevil, where Homer plunges down Springfield Gorge on Bart's skateboard. The episode shows this scene again, reanimated, and then shows the unfunny aftermath. Homer goes through physical rehabilitation and becomes addicted to prescription painkillers. Marge makes a series of terrible financial investments. Bart goes to rehab. The show goes on hiatus. The ratings have dropped. The family members are no longer speaking to each other. The episode explicitly states that the show turned to gimmicky premises and nonsensical plots as the quality declined, and it uses a clip from a specific real episode to make this point. The Principal and the Pauper from Season 9, which was one of the most criticized episodes the show had produced, and which many fans and critics had identified as the moment the show began losing its way. The Simpsons made fun of one of its own most controversial episodes by name inside another episode. This is the show burning its own house down. Country singer Willie Nelson appears as himself and organizes a fake award ceremony to bring the family back together. They reconcile. The show comes back. The narrator suggests that everything is going to be fine. And then Homer leans over to the editor and says this will be the last season. The final scene, after that line, shows a preview of what is supposedly coming next on Behind the Laughter. Huckleberry Hound, the old cartoon dog, stares at the camera and says he is so gay but could not tell anyone. The joke is absurd and quick, and it ends the episode on a laugh. But the laugh comes after that quiet moment in the editing room, and the laugh does not cancel the quiet moment out. When the episode first aired, Fox broadcast it with the Simpson family identified as being from northern Kentucky. When the episode was rerun, the location was changed to southern Missouri. On the DVD, it is back to northern Kentucky. The show could not even settle on a consistent answer to where the family was from inside this one episode, which is either a funny piece of confusion or a small example of the carelessness the episode was partly critiquing. Depending on how you feel about the show at that point, it is probably both. The episode has been described in retrospectives as what should have been the series finale. Multiple critics and writers have made the argument that ending The Simpsons here at season 11 with this episode as the last thing it ever aired would have been the perfect exit. The show admitting its decline. The show packaging that admission as one of its best pieces of comedy. Homer saying it will be the last season and then it actually being the last season. But it was not the last season. It was season 11, and the show kept going, and the ratings graph that appears inside the episode, showing the numbers falling off sharply, turned out to be almost exactly accurate in terms of what actually happened to the show's audience in the years that followed. Season 11 itself marked the first genuinely large drop in viewers in the show's history, going from around 14 million the previous season to a low of 8.8 million. The writers did not know the full extent of this drop when they were making the episode, but they knew something. They could feel it. The episode is the record of that feeling, turned into 22 minutes of television that won an Emmy and made the writing staff's own personal top 15 list. There is something that does not have a clean name about watching a piece of art that knows it is in decline and says so clearly and then keeps going. The Simpsons at its best was one of the greatest television shows ever made. The people who made it knew what it felt like when it was great. They also knew, by season 11, that whatever it had been at its peak was becoming harder to find. Behind the laughter is their record of that knowing, dressed up as a VH1 parody, narrated by the actual voice of Behind the Music, complete with graphics and a fake rise and fall arc, and an Emmy for their trouble. Homer says this will be the last season. It was not. Everything they predicted came true anyway. That is the horror of Behind the Laughter. Not a man with a machete. Not a child without a soul. Not a glowing figure in the trees. Just a show that looked at itself clearly for 22 minutes, described what it saw, won an Emmy for doing it, and then kept going for another 25 years while the prediction it made about itself proved accurate in almost every detail. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next section is about a death, a real one, inside the show. The death of a character who had been there since the beginning, killed off not because the story demanded it, but because of a pay dispute over airplane tickets. A death that was handled so carelessly, so quickly, that even the show's own fans consider it one of the most painful moments in the series. And a funeral speech so quietly devastating that it has been quoted and discussed for over 20 years. Section 7. Alone Again, Natura Diddley. Season 11, Episode 14. The Death Nobody Wanted. There is a moment in Alone Again, Natura Diddley where Reverend Lovejoy stands at Maud Flanders' grave and delivers her eulogy. He says this: "In many ways, Maud Flanders was a supporting player in our lives. She didn't grab our attention with memorable catchphrases or comical accents, but whenever you noticed her or not, Maud was always there, and we thought she always would be." The congregation stands around the grave in silence. Ned Flanders, her husband, listens. Rod and Todd, her 2 young boys, stand beside him. The sky is gray. The mood is quiet. And then the show moves on to Homer trying to help Ned get back into the dating scene, which goes badly in a series of comic scenes, and the episode ends with Ned finding a new romantic interest at a Christian rock concert. That is Alone Again, Natura Diddley. A character who had been part of Springfield since the beginning is killed off in the first few minutes, given a eulogy that the show itself frames as an admission that she was never properly developed, and then replaced within the same episode by a plot about video dating tapes and a cheerful church concert. This episode aired on February 13th, 2000. It is Season 11, Episode 14. It was written by Ian Maxtone Graham and directed by Jim Reardon. It holds a 7.6 out of 10 on IMDb, which, by Simpsons standards, is a quietly damning number. Most Golden Era episodes sit well above 8, and the episodes around it in the same season score higher. The lower number is not a coincidence. It is the audience's collective reaction to something that felt wrong, expressed as a rating. The reason Maud Flanders died has nothing to do with storytelling. It has everything to do with airplane tickets. Maggie Roswell had been the voice of Maud Flanders since the show began. She also voiced Helen Lovejoy, Miss Hoover, and a number of other Springfield residents. She had been with the show since its first season in 1989. By the time Season 11 was being made, she had been living in Denver, Colorado for 4 years. Her recording sessions were in Los Angeles. She had been flying between Denver and Los Angeles twice a week to record her lines, and the cost of airfare kept rising. Roswell asked Fox for a raise. She was being paid $2,000 per episode. She asked for $6,000, which she calculated would cover the cost of the flights. Fox offered her an additional $150 per episode. That offer did not come close to covering her travel costs. She could not afford to keep making the trips. She left the show. A replacement voice actress named Marcia Mitzman-Gavin was hired to fill in for the characters Roswell had been voicing. But the producers decided that keeping a replacement voice for Maud long-term was not something they wanted to do. So they decided to kill the character. Executive producer Mike Scully said at the time that it felt like a chance for Ned Flanders to face a new challenge and grow in a new direction. The idea came up quickly, the team agreed on it, and it moved forward. Maud Flanders, who had been Ned's wife and the mother of his children for over a decade of the show's run, was written out of existence because it was cheaper and simpler than paying for a voice actress's plane tickets. This is the fact underneath the episode. The death of Maud Flanders was not a creative decision, it was a financial one. And when you watch the episode knowing that, the way it handles her death becomes almost impossible to sit with. The death itself happens very quickly. The Simpson family and the Flanders family are at a NASCAR race. Homer, who is shirtless, wants the cheerleaders to fire a t-shirt at him from one of the air cannons they use to shoot merchandise into the crowd. The cheerleaders take aim. At the last possible second, Homer bends down to pick up a bobby pin he spotted on the ground. The full volley of t-shirts flies over him and hits Maud, who is seated directly behind him. The force of the shirts knocks her backwards over the top of the bleachers. She falls from a great height. She dies instantly. Homer then realizes he had parked in the ambulance zone on the way in, which meant the ambulance could not get close enough to help her in time. So Homer is, in a roundabout way, responsible for the death of his neighbor's wife. The woman who had been part of his world for 11 years is dead because he wanted a free t-shirt and then parked badly. This is not treated as a profound moment. It is presented as a series of events that happen quickly, and then the show moves into Ned's grief, and Maud is gone. The last words Ned ever said to Maud before she was knocked from the bleachers were, "No footlongs." She had been telling him that Homer's shirtless behavior was bothering her, and Ned had been responding, and his last words to his wife of many years were about a sandwich size. Maud Flanders died as a cartoon accident. She was not given a meaningful final scene. She was not given a goodbye. She was not given a moment that honored 11 years of being part of this world. She was knocked off a stadium by t-shirts because Homer wanted one and then ducked. Reverend Lovejoy's eulogy, in many ways, Maud Flanders was a supporting player in our lives, is the show acknowledging this directly. The writers knew they had not developed her. They knew she was a background presence. The eulogy is, in a strange way, an apology delivered at a funeral the show created out of convenience. It is the writers saying, out loud, through Lovejoy's voice, that this character deserved more than she got, and that they were aware of it. The line she didn't grab our attention with memorable catchphrases or comical accents is especially sharp. Every major Simpsons character has a signature. Homer has his dough. Ned has his neighborino and his diddly sounds. Bart has his catchphrases. Maud had none of these things. She was warm and religious and supportive and present, and the show never gave her the kind of defining moment that would make her loss feel as heavy as it should. Lovejoy's eulogy honors this and criticizes it at the same time. But whenever you noticed her or not, Maud was always there, and we thought she always would be. That sentence is both a tribute and a confession. The show is admitting that it took Maud for granted, that she was part of the furniture of Springfield in a way that made her easy to overlook until she was gone. And now she is gone, and the show is standing at her grave saying so, and then moving on to Homer filming Ned's shower for a dating video. The episode was not received well at the time. Many fans considered the killing of Maud a serious mistake. Some critics called it one of the moments that marked the show crossing into a different, worse era. The Winnipeg Free Press called killing Maud a sin, while acknowledging that the circumstances of her death had a certain dark humor to them. Maggie Roswell returned to the show in season 14 after reaching a new agreement with Fox, but Maud was dead. Roswell could only voice her in flashbacks and dream sequences from that point forward. The character who had been there since the beginning, who had stood beside Ned at every neighborhood gathering, who had been the voice of a certain kind of warmth and faith in Springfield, existed from season 11 onward only as a memory. Ned Flanders spent years as a widower after this episode. He eventually married Edna Krabappel in season 23, a relationship that developed over multiple seasons and gave Ned something resembling happiness again. Edna was later written out of the show after Marcia Wallace, her voice actress, passed away in 2013. So Ned lost two wives, the first to a budget dispute, the second to death in real life. That second loss hit differently because the show handled it with genuine care. Ned's grief after losing Edna was treated seriously. The episode that addressed it, titled The Man Who Grew Too Much from season 25, gave Ned space to mourn. The contrast between how the show handled Edna's departure and how it handled Maud's is striking, and it points to something real about where the show was in season 11 compared to where it had been and where it would eventually try to return. Maud Flanders deserved better. The eulogy says so. The show knew it. The rating says it. The fans who remember the episode say it. But she was a supporting player. She didn't have a catchphrase, and the show, for a moment in its 11th season, forgot that the quiet, consistent presence of a person can matter just as much as the loud ones. Maud was always there, and they thought she always would be. And then she was knocked off a stadium by t-shirts because Homer bent down to pick up a penny-sized piece of metal off the floor. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next episode on this list is the one that proved the show could still be frightening on purpose, even deep into seasons that fans had long since written off. An episode that aired 15 years after this one, that was quietly, genuinely terrifying in a way the Treehouse of Horror specials almost never managed, because it happened inside the real world of the show, and the threat inside it was completely, plainly real. Section 8, Halloween of Horror, Season 27, Episode 4. The first real Halloween episode, and The Strangers. There is a moment in Halloween of Horror where Homer Simpson looks at his daughter and says something that no version of Homer in a Treehouse of Horror episode has ever said. He says that the men outside their house are real. Lisa has spent the whole episode trying to manage her fear by reminding herself that scary things are not real. That the monsters at the Halloween attraction were just people in costumes. That the decorations outside houses are just plastic and paint. That the darkness is just the absence of light and nothing lives in it. She has been repeating this to herself like a rule, because rules make frightening things manageable, and Lisa Simpson has always believed that the right information can protect you from almost anything. And then Homer tells her that this time, the thing she is afraid of is actually there. 3 men are outside their house. They came because Homer accidentally got them fired earlier that day. They are not in costumes. They are not part of a show. They are real people who are angry and who have entered the Simpson property with the intention of hurting the family. And Homer and Lisa are alone in the house, and the rest of the family does not know what is happening, and there is no joke coming to make it go away. This is the moment Halloween of Horror becomes something the Treehouse of Horror specials, for all their creativity and darkness, have never quite been. It becomes genuinely scary. Not cartoon scary, not fun scary, the kind of scary that sits in your stomach. Halloween of Horror is Season 27, Episode 4. It aired on October 18th, 2015. It was written by Carolyn Omine and directed by Mike B. Anderson. It is the first Halloween-themed episode in the show's entire history that takes place within the actual canon of the series. Every Treehouse of Horror episode before it existed outside the show's normal continuity. The characters could die, the rules of Springfield did not apply, and the audience always knew it was a safe space where nothing that happened would carry forward. Halloween of Horror is different. Everything that happens in it is real within the show's world. The fear Lisa feels is real. The danger Homer and Lisa face is real. The men outside the house are real. The episode received an A- from Dennis Perkins at the AV Club, who called it an impeccably directed, character-driven story about children's fears and grown-up responsibility, and one of the most assured, human, and outright best Simpsons episodes in years. It won the Annie Award for Best General Audience Animated Television Broadcast Production. It received an Emmy nomination for Outstanding Animated Program. In 2019, Vulture named it the 56th best episode in the series to stream. In 2024, an updated ranking placed it 59th. These are not the numbers of a late-season episode that people are being polite about. These are the numbers of an episode that genuinely worked. The episode starts the day before Halloween. Homer has decorated the family house with an elaborate setup he calls Everscream Terrors. He is extremely proud of it. The decorations are everywhere. Skeletons, lights, fog machines, the full commitment. Ned Flanders stops by and asks Homer if he is going to head up to the treehouse to tell 3 horrifying tales, which is what the show does every year in the Treehouse of Horror episodes. Homer tells Ned flatly that they are doing that next week, and describes the upcoming special with visible boredom. Psycho with Skinner and his mom, a Muppet Wizard of Oz thing, and then one where furniture gets smart and takes over the world or something. This is the show acknowledging its own Halloween tradition and then setting it aside. The writers are saying, through Homer's voice, that they know what the audience expects and they are doing something different. It is a quiet moment of confidence from a show that had spent years being accused of going through the motions. The family goes to Krusty Land's Halloween Horror Night. Marge, Bart, and Maggie have a fine time. Homer is supposed to be keeping a close eye on Lisa, who is finally old enough to attend. But Homer gets distracted, and Lisa encounters the horror attractions. Costumed performers, animatronic monsters, loud, sudden sounds, without the preparation or the parental presence she needed. She is terrified. She breaks down crying in Homer's arms outside the attraction, and the show lets this moment be genuinely sad. No joke interrupts it. No cutaway pulls the scene apart. Lisa cries, and Homer holds her, and the episode does not flinch from it. Homer takes down all the Everscream Terrors decorations because Lisa cannot handle seeing them. The house is stripped bare. Marge takes Bart and Maggie to a Halloween party because the holiday should not be ruined for everyone, and Homer stays home with Lisa. It is just the two of them. Earlier in the day, Homer had gone to a Halloween pop-up shop run by Apu to buy replacement decorations. 3 seasonal employees there offered him a deal. They were willing to give him a discount because they were quietly taking merchandise from the store without Apu's knowledge. Homer, without thinking about what he was doing, mentioned this to Apu directly in front of the employees, while also telling Apu not to tell Old Man Squitchy about it, apparently not realizing that Old Man Squitchy was his name for Apu. All 3 employees were fired immediately. They said they would get revenge. Homer forgot about this by the time he got home. He had decorations to put up and a family to manage, and the comment slipped out of his memory the way minor things do. But the 3 men did not forget. They know where Homer lives. They know the family's routine. And on Halloween night, while Marge and Bart and Maggie are out and Homer and Lisa are alone, they come to the house. The episode draws its threat from real films. The writers were clearly thinking about home invasion movies like The Strangers, a 2008 film in which a couple is terrorized in their house by people in masks for reasons that are never fully explained. The horror of that kind of story is its simplicity. There is no supernatural element. There is no monster that requires special rules to defeat. There are just people outside who want to hurt you, and you are inside, and the walls between you are not as solid as they felt an hour ago. Halloween of Horror uses this structure and places it inside the Simpson house. Homer and Lisa retreat to the attic. They hear the men moving through the rooms below them. They try to stay quiet. They try to signal for help. They accidentally activate a set of dancing skeleton decorations called the Signor Skeletinos, which Homer had stored in the attic, and the noise gives away exactly where they are hiding. Homer climbs onto the roof to try to light fireworks that are stored there, 4th of July leftovers, so that the light and noise will attract attention. The wind keeps putting out his matches. Lisa, in a moment of problem-solving that feels completely true to who she is, remembers that her security object, a small piece of synthetic animal tail she calls Taily, is made of polyester. Polyester burns easily. She hands it to her father. Homer burns Taily to light the fireworks. The sky lights up. People come. The men are arrested almost immediately. The sacrifice of Taily is a small detail that the episode has been building toward without announcing itself. Taily was established early in the episode as Lisa's comfort object, the thing she holds when she is afraid, the physical anchor she reaches for when the world feels too large and too frightening. It is a piece of a toy that fell apart at some point, just a tail with no body attached, but Lisa has carried it and held it and used it to get through scary moments for as long as she can remember. She burns it to save herself and her father. She gives up the thing that represented her ability to manage fear because the fear is now real, and managing it requires action rather than comfort. Writer Carolyn Omine based Lisa's fear in this episode on her own personal experiences and on the experiences of her son and niece. She incorporated her own instincts as a parent into the way Homer behaves when Lisa is scared. The specific way a parent tries to be brave for a child while also being genuinely afraid themselves. Director Mike B. Anderson based Taylor on a toy his own daughter used as a security object. These details are small, but they explain why the emotional parts of the episode feel real in a way that so many late-season Simpsons episodes do not. The people who made it were drawing from actual feelings rather than just filling 22 minutes. Executive producer Matt Selman said he loved the episode's central idea, showing the difference between fear of things that are not real and fear of things that are. Lisa spends the first half of the episode paralyzed by imaginary dangers, things in costumes, decorations that look like monsters. She spends the second half facing something that is actually dangerous. The episode does not present these as the same. It takes her earlier fear seriously as a real psychological response, and then it shows what happens when the real version arrives and she has to find a different way through it. The show, at season 27, was 30 years deep into its run. It had produced more episodes than almost any scripted television show in history. Most people who had grown up with it had long since stopped expecting it to do something new. And then it made an episode that was genuinely frightening, earned its emotion honestly, and sent a father and daughter through a real home invasion inside the actual continuity of the series. No safety net. No non-canon disclaimer. No reset button at the end of the episode that makes everything as if it never happened. Homer and Lisa were in danger. They got through it together. The danger was real. That is enough. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. What comes next on this list is the only episode that made the whole country wait. The only time The Simpsons ended a season on a cliffhanger so large that it became a genuine cultural event. A mystery that ran all summer, a contest with real prizes, and an answer that, when it finally came, revealed that the most dangerous person in Springfield had been sitting quietly in plain sight the whole time, too small for anyone to take seriously, with a lollipop in her hand. Section 9. Who Shot Mr. Burns? Parts 1 and 2. Season 6, Episode 25, and Season 7, Episode 1. The Mystery That Stopped the Country. There is a moment at the end of Who Shot Mr. Burns Part 1 where Mr. Burns collapses in the town square. He has just unveiled a machine he built to block out the sun over Springfield. A device designed specifically to keep sunlight from reaching the town so that its residents would be forced to use more electricity from his power plant. He stands there in the square having just activated it, darkness falling over Springfield in the middle of the day. And then a gunshot rings out. Burns staggers. He falls against the town's sundial. He reaches up with one hand and points at something, or someone, before losing consciousness entirely. The camera pulls back, the music swells, and then the screen cuts to black and the words "To be continued" appear. That was May 21st, 1995. The country waited all summer. Who Shot Mr. Burns is 2 episodes. Part 1 is Season 6, Episode 25. It aired on May 21st, 1995. Part 2 is Season 7, Episode 1. It aired on September 10th, 1995. Part 1 was written by Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein and directed by Jeffrey Lynch. Part 2 was written by Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein and directed by Wes Archer. Together, they form the only true two-part mystery the show has ever told, the only season-ending cliffhanger in the show's history, and one of the most talked-about television events of the mid-1990s. The show ran a real contest. Viewers were invited to send in their guess for who shot Mr. Burns. The contest received entries from across the country. A correct answer won a prize. The answer was kept secret through the entire summer. Cast members were asked not to reveal it. The production team kept it locked down. And for several months, the question of who shot Mr. Burns was a genuine piece of American pop culture conversation, the kind of talking point that came up at dinner tables and in school hallways and on early internet message boards. The setup for the shooting runs through the entirety of Part 1, and it is constructed as a real mystery, the kind with clues planted carefully, suspects developed honestly, and motives distributed widely enough that almost anyone could have done it. Mr. Burns begins the episode by stealing the oil well that was discovered underneath Springfield Elementary School. The oil well had been found by Bart's dog, Santa's little helper, and it represented a potential source of money for the school. New books, better equipment, real resources for children who did not have them. Burns takes it. He redirects the oil flow to benefit himself and cuts the school off completely. He then moves against the other institutions and people of Springfield. He blocks sunlight from Moe's Tavern, destroying the business. He causes an accident that injures Grandpa Simpson. He fires Smithers, his own loyal assistant of many years, because Smithers objected to the sun-blocking plan on moral grounds. He demotes Homer at the power plant. He does damage, deliberately or carelessly, to nearly every significant character in Springfield. By the time he stands in the town square to activate his sun-blocking device, the list of people with genuine reasons to want him hurt is enormous. The episode presents this list openly. Chief Wiggum, Skinner, Tito, Sideshow Mel, Barney, Moe, Grandpa, Tito the Hobo, and others all have documented grievances. The show is doing something unusual here. It is building a mystery by making almost every character a plausible suspect, not through cheap misdirection, but through genuine plotting. Burns hurt all of these people. Any of them could have been the one to act. The summer passed. Part 2 aired in September. Chief Wiggum investigates. Mulder and Scully do not show up this time. The investigation is conducted with the specific, lovable incompetence that Chief Wiggum always brings to law enforcement in Springfield. Evidence points in multiple directions. Suspects are questioned. The town remains in darkness because the sun-blocking device is still running, and nobody has figured out how to turn it off. Then the answer comes. Magic Simpson shot Mr. Burns. She is an infant. She is 8 months old. She does not speak. She has never, in the history of the show, been presented as a threat to anyone. She sits in her car seat and watches the world go by, and occasionally does something quietly remarkable that the adults around her miss entirely because they are too busy looking at each other. What happened was this. Burns, in the chaos following his public appearance in the town square, encountered Maggie alone. He reached for her lollipop, trying to take it from her because Burns takes things from people. It is what he does. It is the central fact of his character. In the struggle, his hand closed around a gun that was in Maggie's vicinity. The gun fired. Burns was shot. The official verdict, as delivered by Chief Wiggum, is that the shooting was accidental. Maggie did not intend to shoot Mr. Burns in any meaningful sense. She is a baby. She does not have intentions the way adults have intentions. The gun went off during a struggle with a man who was trying to take her candy, and he was the one who got hurt. But the image the show leaves you with is not accidental. The final shot of part 2, after the mystery is resolved and the case is closed, is Maggie Simpson looking directly at the camera. She puts her pacifier back in her mouth. She narrows her eyes slightly. And the music that plays underneath this is not the warm resolution music that normally closes a Simpsons episode. It is darker than that, more ambiguous. The show does not tell you what to make of Maggie. It never has, in this episode or any other. She is the Simpson who watches everything and says nothing. She is the one who is always present and never fully accounted for. In a family where Homer is loud and Bart is chaotic and Lisa is expressive and Marge is the voice of reason, Maggie sits in her car seat and takes everything in and gives nothing back. Burns had to be shot by someone. The show considered various options. Making a regular adult character the shooter would have carried consequences for that character and for the show's ongoing relationships between people. Making it Maggie meant the shooter was a baby, which technically meant no one was accountable, but it also meant something stranger and harder to name. The most powerful man in Springfield, the man who had just blocked out the sun, was brought down by the smallest, quietest, most overlooked member of the main family. The mystery itself was constructed with genuine care. The writers went back through part 1 after deciding on Maggie as the shooter and planted specific visual clues that would reward viewers who went looking. In one scene, Burns and Maggie are framed in the same shot in a way that connects them. In another, a shadow is positioned deliberately. The production team has confirmed in DVD commentaries that these clues were intentional and were placed knowing that Maggie was the answer. The contest the show ran over the summer was a real promotional effort. A viewer who correctly guessed Maggie as the shooter won a prize, though because so many people guessed incorrectly and the correct answer was genuinely surprising, the number of correct entries was small. The contest generated press coverage. Late-night shows discussed it. It was treated as a genuine television event in a way that very few animated series had ever managed. Part 1 ends with Burns pointing at something as he falls. This image, the old man on the sundial reaching up, pointing, became one of the most reproduced images from the show's entire run that summer. Billboards appeared, magazine covers used it. The question was everywhere. What makes the two-part episode genuinely unsettling underneath all of the comedy and the cultural event of it is the sun blocking device. Burns actually does it. He actually blocks out the sun over Springfield. For the entirety of part 2, the town is in artificial darkness because one man decided that he wanted more money and was willing to take natural light away from an entire community to get it. Children cannot play outside. Plants cannot grow. The sky above Springfield is permanently overcast because of a machine. This is not treated as a temporary joke. It is the backdrop of the entire second episode. The investigation happens in a town without sunlight. The darkness is present in every scene. And the resolution of the mystery, the arrest of no one, the conclusion that the shooting was accidental, the quiet closing image of Maggie's narrowed eyes, does not include anyone turning the machine off on screen. The show resolves the mystery of who shot Burns. It does not make a dramatic moment of restoring the sun. Springfield survived. The show moved forward. Mr. Burns recovered and returned to work. Maggie went back to her car seat. But the image stays. The man on the sundial pointing at nothing we can see. The baby with narrowed eyes. The town in darkness all summer long, waiting for an answer that turned out to be an 8-month-old and a lollipop. That is the Who Shot Mr. Burns two-parter. The only cliffhanger in the show's history. The mystery that ran all summer. The answer that nobody expected. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. What comes last on this list is different from everything before it. It is not a thriller or a mystery or a banned episode or a show admitting its own decline. It is a dream. A long, strange, beautiful, lonely dream that Homer has in the middle of the day after eating the hottest pepper anyone in Springfield has ever tasted. And in that dream, a voice that belongs to Johnny Cash tells Homer something true about himself that the show had been quietly suggesting for years. Section 10. El viaje misterioso de nuestro Homer. The Mysterious Voyage of Homer. Season 8, Episode 9, The Loneliest Trip in Springfield. There is a moment near the middle of The Mysterious Voyage of Homer where Homer Simpson is completely alone in a desert that does not exist. The sky above him is dark and full of stars. The ground beneath him is flat and pale and goes on forever in every direction. There are no buildings, no roads, no Marge, no Bart or Lisa, no Flanders waving from next door, no power plant in the distance, nothing that connects this place to Springfield or to the life Homer has built there over the course of 8 seasons. He walks forward because there is nothing else to do, and then a coyote appears. It is glowing softly. It opens its mouth and speaks to Homer in the voice of Johnny Cash. It tells Homer that he has a soulmate somewhere in the world, one perfect person who truly knows him and understands him. Homer says that must be Marge. The coyote does not confirm this. That pause, the coyote's silence after Homer says Marge's name, is the emotional engine of the entire episode. Because the episode is not really about chili peppers or hallucinations or a spirit guide in the desert. It is about the oldest fear a person in a relationship can carry. The fear that the person you love and have built your life with might not actually know you. That the connection you believe you have might be slightly off. That you are, underneath everything, more alone than you have allowed yourself to believe. The Mysterious Voyage of Homer is Season 8, Episode 9. It aired on January 5, 1997. It was written by Ken Keeler and directed by Jim Reardon. It holds a 9.1 out of 10 rating on IMDb, placing it among the highest-rated episodes the show has ever produced. It features Johnny Cash as the voice of the Spirit Coyote, the only episode in which Cash appeared on the show, and a performance he gave that is quiet and warm and carries a specific weight that comes from who Johnny Cash was as a person and how his voice sounds when it is being gentle. The episode begins at the Springfield Chili Cook-Off. This is an annual event, as the episode presents it, and it is taken seriously by its participants. Homer arrives expecting to enjoy himself and eat as much chili as possible. He works his way through the various booths, sampling everything, mostly unimpressed. Then he reaches Chief Wiggum's booth. Wiggum has made his chili with Guatemalan insanity peppers. These are presented in the episode as extraordinarily hot. Hot beyond the normal scale of hot things. Hot in a way that has genuine physical consequences for anyone who eats them. Wiggum stores them in a special container. He handles them carefully. He does not offer them as a normal tasting because they are not a normal ingredient. Homer, who has spent the episode establishing his extremely high tolerance for spicy food by eating candles and insulation and other things that are not food, decides he needs to try the peppers. He prepares himself by coating his mouth and throat with candle wax to protect against the heat. He eats several peppers. He appears fine. Then the hallucinations begin. What the animators and director Jim Reardon created for the hallucination sequence is unlike anything else the show had done before or has done since. The visual style changes completely. Colors become wrong. Characters' faces stretch and distort. Homer looks at a candle and sees it bloom into something enormous and strange. He looks at people he knows and their features ripple. The world of Springfield, which is always drawn in a specific, consistent way that the audience has internalized over hundreds of episodes, briefly becomes something unrecognizable. Homer runs out of the chili cook-off and into the night. The real Springfield falls away. The desert appears. The desert sequence was designed specifically for this episode. The backgrounds are different from anything else in the show. The colors used are colors the show does not normally use. The camera moves in ways the show does not normally move. The production team made a deliberate choice to signal through every visual element available that Homer is somewhere the rules of his world do not apply. The coyote finds him there. Johnny Cash's voice coming from a glowing desert animal in a hallucinatory landscape is one of the stranger casting decisions in the show's history, and also one of its most perfect. Cash's voice has a specific quality, low and unhurried, and somehow both warm and serious at the same time, that suits the scene in a way that a more obviously famous or more traditionally animated show voice would not have. He sounds like someone who has seen a lot of the world and is not in a hurry to be anywhere. He tells Homer about the soulmate. He tells Homer that somewhere in Homer's life there is one person who truly knows him. He tells Homer to find that person. Homer wakes up face down in a soccer field the next morning. He is alone. The cook-off is over, the desert is gone, and he is suddenly, urgently convinced that Marge might not be the person who truly knows him. This conviction drives the rest of the episode. Homer watches Marge during the day and becomes increasingly aware of all the ways she does not fully understand him. She misreads his moods. She assumes things about him that are not quite accurate. She loves him, clearly, but loving someone and truly knowing someone are different things, and Homer is not certain, as he watches her across the kitchen, that Marge has the second one. He says this to her, not cruelly, not as an accusation, just as the truth as he currently sees it. He tells her that he is not sure she is his soulmate, and Marge, who has organized her entire life around their relationship, does not know what to do with this information. They separate for an evening, not a dramatic separation with packing and lawyers and doors slamming. Just Homer going out alone, walking around Springfield at night, looking for whoever the coyote meant. He visits a lighthouse. He meets a lighthouse keeper who quotes philosophical ideas about loneliness. He rides a small boat. He floats on the water under the stars. The image of Homer alone on that boat, floating in the dark, looking up at the sky, is the most genuinely solitary image the show ever produced. Not sad in the way that cartoon sad usually works, exaggerated, played for emotion, with music telling you how to feel. Just quiet. A man on the water at night, genuinely uncertain whether the most important connection in his life is what he believed it was. Marge finds him there. She had been looking. She explains how she found him. She thought about what Homer would do. She thought about where he would go. She followed the logic of who he is. She found him not because she had a map or a phone or someone to tell her where he was, but because she knows him well enough to trace his movements through the world by thinking like him. Homer realizes, sitting in that boat, that this is what the coyote meant. Marge is his soulmate not because their relationship is easy or because she always understands everything he feels. She is his soulmate because she can find him in the dark, because she can think like him when she needs to, Because whatever knowing someone actually means at its deepest level, she has it. The episode ends warmly. Homer and Marge reunite. The fear passes. The sun comes up. But the middle of the episode, Homer alone on the water, the coyote's silence after Homer said Marge's name, the desert that went on forever, does not fully go away just because the ending is warm. The show placed its main character in genuine existential fear for the better part of 22 minutes. Not fear of a villain or a monster or a physical threat. Fear of the most ordinary and most devastating thing a person can fear. The possibility of being alone, even inside a relationship. The possibility that the walls between people are thicker than they look. The animation produced for the hallucination sequence has never been used again in the show. It was made for this episode and then put away. The backgrounds, the color choices, the way the camera moves during Homer's time in the desert, these are unique to this episode and exist nowhere else in the show's enormous catalog of episodes across 35 plus years. Ken Keeler, who wrote the episode, gave it the full Spanish title, El viaje misterioso de nuestro Homer, which translates as The Mysterious Voyage of Our Homer. The word Homer is the Spanish version of Homer's name. The title is slightly formal and slightly strange in a way that fits the episode perfectly. This is not a regular Homer episode. It is a voyage. It is mysterious, and it belongs specifically to him, to this version of him, walking through a desert that exists only inside the heat of a Guatemalan insanity pepper. This is the last episode on this list. 10 episodes across 35 years of a show that began as a 10-minute sketch on a late-night comedy program and became the longest-running scripted television series in American history. 10 episodes that found the darkness not in Halloween specials or non-canon horror stories, but in the regular world of Springfield, in a child's soul sold for $5, in a glowing old man in the woods, in a banned episode whose guest star's real story became genuinely disturbing, in a show admitting its own decline, in a death born of a pay dispute over airplane tickets, in a baby with narrowed eyes, and in a man floating alone on dark water, wondering whether the person who loves him really knows him. The Simpsons at its scariest was never about monsters. It was about all the things that were already there. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.